Hi everybody, this is Sadie Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me today on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the July My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit. In the kit were 49 in market die cuts, and when I saw this frame I thought that this would be a perfect start for a layout. So I found a small photo and I fit it into the frame, and I think that this photo works well with the size of this frame. I put some adhesive on the photo and centered it, and now I'm popping it up on some fun foam. You can see that there's a piece of cardstock there. I'm going to attach my photo down to that cardstock, and then I'm going to build a large cluster all around the photo. Now I'm inking the edges with some Distress ink in Vintage Photo and attaching it down to that paper. So I pull out a bunch of the embellishments that I think I want to use, and I just start playing around with some die cuts and chipboard pieces. There's also some fussy cut pieces mixed in there. And I like to use this, I don't know if you'd call it a technique, but I like to use this idea of making the cluster on a separate piece of paper from the background paper, and that helps me to move the cluster around, and if I want to put any mixed media on the background, it's helpful because I can see exactly how much mixed media to use and exactly where the photo is going to go. So it's just something that I enjoy doing. But of course, you could do this exact same thing on the pattern paper or the background paper that you're going to use. So this gave me an idea of which embellishments I'm going to be using. I wanted to include this large ticket underneath the photo, so I started by inking it, but then I was thinking that I wanted to distress it as well. So I distressed it with the edge of my scissors, and then I inked it again because I had scraped away some of the inking with my scissors. And now I'm using that same Vintage Photo and I'm inking the edges of some of the other elements that are on the background. And then after I ink the edges of most of these pieces, I attach them down to the piece of white paper. And I know that I can always reposition them because I'm using the ATG adhesive, so even if I don't like where something is, I can switch it around a little bit. The photo that I'm using is a photo of my older daughter. We took this photo several years ago when we went to the Magic Gardens in Philadelphia. It's a really cool place. The whole place is like a huge mosaic. It's a house turned into a work of art. And so she's standing in front of one of the beautiful mosaic walls. And I just felt like this picture went really well with the colors that are in this collection. This collection is the Prima Nature Lover collection. And like I said, there were also some elements of 49 in market mixed in with this kit this month as well. This was actually the second time that we went to the Magic Gardens. The first time we went, my younger daughter Julia was disappointed that she hadn't worn something fancier because she had said it was so pretty. She felt she could take some nice pictures there. And I was surprised by that because normally I'm the only one who's concerned about taking pictures. But we did return a week or two later and we did take a lot more pictures and the kids had a lot of fun doing it. So I have a lot of pictures from this day and I spend a lot of time scrapbooking these pictures. So getting back to the layout, I'm popping up these birds. I put some foam on the right side of them because the left side is sitting on top of the photo, which is already popped up on some foam. I really like using the ATG adhesive on the paper elements on the page, but for the dimensional flowers, I feel like you really need some wet glue. So I used some fun foam. I popped up one of the flowers, and then I put some of the Elmer's gel glue underneath the flowers to attach them down. And you can see that I'm continuing to go around the layout, inking the edges of all of the elements and then attaching them down. I'm popping this little circle up on some fun foam, and I like the way a little bit of dimension, even though the fun foam just adds a tiny bit of dimension, I think that adds some interest to the layout, and even the littlest bit of dimension I feel like adds something to the overall look. For another layout that I made this month, I created a whole bunch of border strips. I used a Martha Stewart border punch, I believe, for this one, and I had them sitting on my desk, the ones that were left over, and I decided to put one of them underneath the photo. But first I'm going to work on these 3 small hearts. So I am inking the edges with the vintage photo. And then I found two chipboard pieces. One chipboard piece said joy, one said happy. And then I also found the word sweet. And so I'm going to put each of those words on each of the hearts. And now I'm fitting that border in. I just inked the edges and now I'm just positioning it under the photo. And this month's kit had lots of butterflies in it. There was one sheet of pattern paper that was covered in butterflies. I fussy cut those butterflies out and they went a long way. So I'm using them again on this layout. I have fussy cut them out and now I'm going to use some fun foam to pop them up a bit. For most of the butterflies, I add some foam to the back of their wings, and that helps to pop the wings up a little bit and make the butterflies look dimensional. You can see here that I cut two very small pieces of foam and I attach them just to the wings, and there's some adhesive in the center, and that way the center will stick to the page and the wings will be lifted up by the foam. You can see that I have a lot of butterflies there, and I'm trying the different sizes and the different colors, and I'm spreading them around the background to see what goes best with what's already down there. And I don't show all the footage of me attaching down the butterflies because it's a little repetitive, but I do add a few more to the layout. And now I'm using my scissors and I'm cutting away the excess white cardstock. And once the white cardstock is removed, I'll have my large photo cluster and I'll be able to move it around on the background. I'm going to be doing a mixed media background, so this really helps me to know exactly where to put the mixed media because I can keep placing it on top of the background. So now I'm going to be assembling those hearts and those words that I had mentioned earlier. I have the edges inked and I'm just going to be attaching down each of the words that I selected for the hearts using some glue. And then I looked over and decided that that border was a little bit too long, so I trimmed it off. I wanted to add a little something right where I cut off the border, and so I cut down this little piece of ephemera, I ink the edges, and I just stick it in there. And now I'm sprinkling those hearts around the page. And once I decide where to put them, I'm attaching each one of them down. I like to attach little things down as quickly as possible because sometimes little things will disappear. So I always feel more secure when they are attached down to the layout. And now I want to start applying some sprays. So I take a pencil and I just make some very rough marks to show me about where that large cluster is going to be. So I'm using a yellow Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist spray, and I will put the names of all of the colors that I use in the description box. And here I'm using the packaging technique, which I love. I love the way it makes the paint look like it's very natural. And I don't want to go too crazy with the color here. I'm using yellow and pink because those are colors that are in the collection, but they are not the dominant colors in the cluster that I made. So I like the way it looks when there are different colors in the background, and that way the cluster doesn't fade into the background. So to create my mixed media background, I'm using some Tattered Angels Glimmer Mists, and I'm also using a Nuvo Mica Mist. The yellow colors that I used were Summer Glow and Sunkissed, and I also used some Pink Mint and Pink Lemonade, and those were all the Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist colors. And then I used Turkish Rose, that was a Nuvo Mica Mist color. And you can see that I'm not going for a bold background. I'm trying to make the background subdued. It's very hard for me because I love to add lots of color and I love building up layers of color and I love to have a lot of intensity, but I really don't want the background to be super bright. And a lot of times with the sprays, if you use them before, especially when you use them on gesso, the colors fade away a lot once they dry. I do think it's important to build up layers of color, but I also don't want the background to draw all the attention. I just want it to be a nice complement to the photo and to the clusters around the photo. I love using the packaging technique to make backgrounds. The packaging technique is actually how I first started putting paint down on the backgrounds of my scrapbook layouts. I saw a YouTube video where somebody was using this technique, and I watched many, many times before I actually tried it out myself. And I know a lot of people are getting really into making backgrounds with paints and sprays and all different kinds of media. But if you haven't tried it and you would like to, I would suggest that you just get a piece of paper, get some gesso, and then just get some cheap watercolors and just try it out. It's really a lot of fun. And once you get over the initial fear of making a mistake, it's actually very fun and relaxing. I use the heat tool and I dry the entire background thoroughly. Once it's totally dry, I take some gesso and this little sponge and I add some gesso to the background. And what this does is this helps to bring down the intensity of the color so that the background isn't too bright. And I only want to dull down this background a little bit, so I just put one coat of gesso down, and then I look at it and I decide that one coat is just right, I don't need another coat. Now I'm going to add some texture to the background. I'm using some Crafters Workshop modeling paste along with some white acrylic paint, and I'm using the stencil that was provided in the kit. But before I do that, I realize I did not add enough splatters, so I'm going back in with some of the Tattered Angels Glimmer Mists, and I'm just adding some pink and yellow splatters to the background. And once I add the splatters, I will roll my paper towel roll over the top to absorb any of the extra paint. And then I use the heat tool and I dry the background really well. Now that the background is dry, now I'm going to go in with that modeling paste. And I'm just going around the outside of this kind of oval shape that I've made here. And I just want to add a little bit of texture. And I love this stencil. I love the way its lines going in all different directions. This stencil is made by Vicky Boutin, and she has a lot of really great stencils. So I have to mix up a little bit more of the modeling paste. So again, I take out my acrylic paint and the modeling paste. I mix them together. And I mentioned this in many of my videos, but in case you missed it, I like to add the white acrylic paint because that will keep the modeling paste from being off-white, and I like it to be a nice pure white. And now you can see how handy it is that I have that big photo cluster on a separate piece of paper. I'm able to move it around and make sure that the area of color on my background is the right size. I'm adding some white splatters here. Love adding white splatters. It's just acrylic paint that I've added a little bit of water to. And I just keep that handy on my desk because I do add white splatters to almost every mixed media background. I'm scraping up a little bit of the modeling paste. I just didn't like the way it looked there. I thought it extended too far past the color. And you can see that I'm trimming the modeling paste in a couple of places. And then I add some white splatters over the top just to help everything blend in. And then I add just a few little splatters of a bluish color to the background. I didn't want to add black on this layout because there really isn't going to be any black, so I thought that I would add some blue instead. Earlier on, you saw that I used some Vintage Photo Distress ink, and I inked the edges of all of the embellishments that are on the layout. And I wanted to just create a little bit more contrast between that large cluster in the background, so I go around one more time with the dauber and I add some more ink to just the outside edge of the large cluster. And I feel like that will just give a little bit more contrast. And then just to make sure that the background and the large cluster have some kind of relationship, I don't want them to look like they are from two different layouts. I just put a little bit of the vintage photo on a couple of areas on the background. I use the dauber and I blend it in, and I'm mainly blending it into the areas that have the modeling paste. And in a couple of spots, I didn't like the way the ink looked, so I just used some water and a paper towel, and I was able to fade out those areas of ink. I want to mat my background on some dark blue cardstock. So I cut the background down to 11.5 inches by 11.5 inches. That just gives me a very small border of the blue all around the edge. And then I used some more of the vintage photo and I inked the edges of the background. And now you can see I'm putting a lot of ATG adhesive on the mixed media paper, and I do that because since I've done mixed media on it, it's a little bit buckled, And this helps to flatten it out by attaching it to a flat piece of cardstock. I have learned that you can flatten out your mixed media backgrounds by putting them through a laminator, so that's another way to flatten them out. I learned that from Paige Evans. That was a great tip. And now I am taking a flower that I had fussy cut out, and I'm cutting it into a couple of different pieces and spreading it around the layout. I also replaced a slightly larger butterfly with a smaller butterfly because I felt that the butterfly resting on the heart was so big that you couldn't even tell it was a heart. So I found a smaller butterfly and I placed that right in the center of the heart. I added a large die-cut fern, and then I began adding one of my favorite touches to the background, and that is die-cut leaves. I used 2 different dyes and 2 different colors of embossing powder. Both of the embossing powders are a dark blue, but the Sizzix dye leaves, I made those the darker color, and then the other dye, which I don't know the manufacturer of, I made that the slightly lighter color. And so now I'm just trimming them and trying them in different places around the layout. So I'm trimming the die cut pieces a little shorter. I don't want them all to look the same, so I'm varying the amount of each of the branches that I'm using. I'm varying the direction, and I want them to look very natural, so I do spend a decent amount of time just kind of fidgeting around with them and moving them to different places. And I just keep moving things around until I'm happy. I feel that especially with the florals, you really have to have them down on the layout and see how they look. And then I always walk away for a while and come back, because just like with a written piece, when you look back at it an hour later, all of the mistakes jump out. And I feel like the same thing happens with scrapbooking. All of the things that maybe are a little out of balance, they are suddenly very clear and they can be corrected. I love these borders, and I had them on another layout and I ended up taking them off, but I had already inked the edges with some black soot Distress Oxide, and I didn't want them to be black, I wanted them to be brown. So I took the Distress ink in Vintage Photo that I use for everything else, and I put some on the edges, and although the black is still somewhat visible, I feel like it worked out and it's brown enough to match in with this layout. I wanted to call this layout Magic Gardens, so I got some letters that were in a past My Creative Scrapbook kit, and I chose all the letters, and then you could see that I use a ruler to help me place the letters down and position them, and then I just made some adjustments to them. Now I'm adding some pearls, and I cut out a lot of this because I put white pearls on the entire layout, and then I changed my mind and decided that I wanted to put these yellowish pearls on the layout. So I replaced all of the white pearls with the yellow ones, and I think that I like the way that that looks better. I like the way it adds a little bit more color. To tie the borders in with the main cluster, I'm adding some butterflies, and you could see here that I pop up the wings on some foam, just like I did the other butterflies on the layout. I also want to add some ribbon to the tag that's at the top of the page, so I cut a piece of sparkly white ribbon. And in addition to making the tag look complete, I do like to add some kind of fabric or ribbon on each page because I like the combination of the textures. I thought it would be nice to add some leaves under the title to highlight the title, and I do end up cutting that back a little bit. I felt like that was a little bit too full. I also added a little bow that's made for children's barrettes under the word happy, and that completes the layout. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, I hope that you will give it a thumbs up. It really helps out my channel. I have the link to the My Creative Scrapbook website in the description box, and you can take a look on the website and check out all the beautiful kits that they have. I want to say thank you to every one of you for watching my videos, for liking them, for subscribing to my channel, for leaving comments. I really appreciate all of those things. And if you leave a comment, I might take a little bit of time, but I do write back to every single person who writes to me. I hope that everybody has a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.